Everything you think you know about the Matrix isn't the real trap. The real trap is that you think you would notice it, that you would feel the moment you got captured, that the prison would look like a prison, that the walls would reveal themselves, that the system would show its hand. But that's the illusion. The Matrix isn't something you wake up in, it's something you wake up from. And right now, if you're listening to this, you're already feeling the pressure. That strange discomfort that whispers, something in my life doesn't add up. That subtle ache in your chest telling you, there's something more than what I was taught. And the thing you call intuition, that thing you keep dismissing as imagination or sensitivity, that's not a glitch. That's the higher self trying to pull you out. But to escape, you need to confront the truth almost no one dares to say aloud. The Matrix isn't an external system. It's the internal programming that convinces you the cage is real. You were never meant to notice the bars. You were meant to love them, defend them, cling to them, call them reality. The Matrix doesn't capture your body. It captures your perception, your beliefs, your identity, your emotional defaults, your sense of what's possible and what's impossible. It doesn't need chains. It needs your agreement. Think about it. How do you control a population without force? You control their stories, their fears, their desires, their definitions of success, their definitions of failure, their sense of self, their sense of time, their sense of meaning. You don't imprison a mind, you program it. And everything in your life, the schools you went to, the rules you were taught, the roles you were assigned, the labels you swallowed, was part of that programming. Not because someone wanted to hurt you, but because unconscious minds create unconscious systems. And unconscious systems need you to stay asleep to survive. The Matrix doesn't want you to question. It wants you to comply, to be predictable, to follow the script, to stay inside the identity you didn't choose. But here's the part they never prepared you for. The moment you begin to question the script, it starts to fall apart. Maybe you felt it. The sensation that you're living a life that doesn't belong to you. The weight of expectations that never felt like yours. The constant repetition of days that feel like recycled copies of each other. The feeling that your potential is trapped behind something you can't quite name. That isn't depression. That isn't confusion. That isn't lack of discipline. That's your consciousness rattling the cage. That's the beginning of escape. Because the Matrix doesn't fear rebels. It fears people who remember. People who reconnect with the part of themselves that the system can't touch. People who stop seeking permission. People who stop needing validation. People who stop believing the rulebook was ever written for them. The Matrix thrives when you forget who you are. It dissolves the moment you begin to remember. And that's why your awakening feels uncomfortable, because everything around you was built to keep you inside a version of reality calibrated for survival, stability, and obedience. Not truth, not freedom, not consciousness. Notice what happens when someone finally questions the script. People around them get uncomfortable. The system pushes back. Their old identity tries to pull them back into alignment. Life feels chaotic. The mind feels loud. The ego loops intensify. This isn't failure. This is the firewall. The Matrix always resists before it collapses. But here's the revelation you weren't supposed to have. The Matrix can't stop you from waking up. It can only distract you long enough for you to fall back asleep. That's why the forces that shape your life, societal pressure, cultural narratives, childhood conditioning, fear-based rules, all operate silently, subtle, invisible, familiar. Because the most powerful prison is the one that feels like home. But you're starting to see through it. That's why your old life feels too tight. That's why your old beliefs feel too small. That's why your old patterns feel too repetitive. Because you've outgrown the version of yourself the Matrix can control. And the version of you that's waking up, the one that feels older than your age, wiser than your experiences, and strangely aware of things you never learned. That part of you is not new. It's ancient. It's original. It's the awareness the Matrix could never fully shut down. Here's the truth you've sensed but never had language for. You don't break out of the Matrix by fighting it. You break out by remembering you were never actually inside it. What you call the Matrix is a perceptual cage, a set of mental constructs, a learned identity, a default timeline. But awareness is the key. Once you see the code, you cannot unsee it. Once you notice the pattern, it loses its power. Once you step into the role of observer, the programming dissolves. This is the moment the system fears, the moment you stop reacting and start remembering. Because a mind that remembers its origin becomes uncontrollable, unpredictable, awake. And if you're still here, if you feel the pull in your chest, if something deep inside you is leaning forward right now, then you're already stepping out of the simulation you were taught to inhabit. Now the real question becomes, what is the matrix actually made of, and who built it? Let's go deeper. In the mystery schools of the ancient world, long before the word matrix existed, sages and scribes warned their initiates of something far more subtle than a prison, a dream woven so perfectly that the dreamer would never realize they were asleep. They didn't call it a simulation. They didn't call it control. They called it Mot's veil, the sacred illusion that shapes the mind of every human born into matter. According to the priests of Thoth, the moment consciousness enters a physical body, it passes through a field of forgetfulness, not as punishment, not as a curse, but as a test, to discover whether you can remember truth when everything around you is designed to make you forget. In the inner chambers of Chem, initiates were told, reality is not what it seems, it is what you have been trained to see. This was the first forbidden teaching, a teaching considered dangerous because a human who realizes it can no longer be manipulated. They believed that perception was the true battleground, not politics, not economics, not physical force, but perception, the lens through which consciousness interprets the world. Change the lens, and you change the entire world the observer experiences, not metaphorically, literally. This is why the ancients described the human mind as the chamber of shaping, a place where reality is filtered, labeled, and interpreted through the belief systems installed long before you had any say in who you were allowed to become. The Matrix is modern language for something old, very old, the myth of the two worlds. In Hermetic lore, there was a secret story told only to those who passed the veil of silence. It said that every human lives in two worlds simultaneously, the world that is and the world they've been shown. The world that is, the raw, unfiltered universe, is infinite, mutable, vibrational, open. It responds to consciousness. It bends to awareness. It rearranges itself according to the observer. But the world you've been shown, the one taught to you since childhood, is small, rigid, rule-bound, fear-driven. It's the world that says, this is how things are, this is who you are, this is what's possible. The ancients warned that humans mistake the second world for the first, and that is how they remain trapped. Not physically, but perceptually. Imagine a bird raised in a cage so long that it forgets the sky. One day the door opens, and instead of flying out, the bird stays inside, convinced freedom is dangerous, unknown, unreal. This, the priest said, is the human condition. Not a cage of metal, but a cage of meaning. A cage of inherited beliefs. A cage of unquestioned assumptions. A cage of narratives crafted by those who woke up before you did. The forbidden mechanism, the architects of perception. The ancient texts speak of architects, not gods, not rulers, but the ones who understood how human consciousness works. The architects knew that if you control what people fear, what they desire, what they believe, what they think is normal, what they think is possible, then you don't need chains, you just need stories. Give a man a belief, they said, and he will build the prison himself. This wasn't cynicism. This was understanding. Because the human mind is creative. Whatever it repeats, it programs. Whatever it accepts, it reinforces. Whatever it fears, it obeys. You were never controlled by force. You were controlled by meaning, by assumptions so old you never stopped to question them. The Matrix isn't a place, it's a worldview so deeply embedded that you mistake it for reality. Why Thoth represented the one who writes the code. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, was not simply the god of writing. He was the architect of symbols, and symbols were the original code of the world. Every symbol is a doorway into perception. Every perception is a doorway into reality. When initiates learned the language of symbols, they learned how the universe is structured. Not physically, but mentally. The matrix in Hermetic philosophy was described as a mental construct maintained by collective agreement, a shared dream, a collectively programmed field. And the greatest secret? The dream dissolves the moment an individual stops agreeing with it. This is why ancient initiates trained to see beyond appearances, beyond the stories, beyond the programming, beyond the default setting handed to them by society. To break out of the matrix was to regain conscious sovereignty. To look directly at the worlds you have inherited and whisper, I do not consent to this limitation. The hidden door, the observer behind the observer. In the uppermost chamber of the Temple of Thoth, was a teaching so destabilizing that it was given only to initiates ready to confront the self directly. They called it the eye behind the eye, the observer behind the one doing the observing. This was the Hermetic key, the forbidden insight, the truth that collapses the entire matrix of perception. You are not the one inside the world. You are the one generating the world through perception. This insight changes everything. You go from character to dreamer, from victim to creator, from prisoner to architect. Once you realize you are the observer, and the observer shapes the simulation, the matrix can no longer hold you. Not because you escaped it, but because you stepped into the role of the one who writes the code. This was the hidden initiation called the second birth, the moment the human recognizes, I am not my programming. Only then could they see the invisible threads controlling their life. Inherited beliefs, cultural narratives, emotional patterns, family conditioning, collective fear, societal scripts. Awakening was never about rebellion. It was about clarity. Seeing the code for what it is, a pattern, a story, a collective hallucination dressed up as the real world. The secret every ancient school taught. Egypt called it Mot's Veil, Greece called it the cave, India called it Maya, Tibet called it the dream, Hermeticists called it the mind, and modern metaphysics calls it the matrix. Different names, same truth. What you believe to be reality is only the projection of consciousness filtered through programming. You do not escape this matrix by fighting it. You escape by waking the observer, the one behind your eyes, the one who is never asleep. The moment you see the world through that awareness, the matrix cracks. Its illusions fade. Its stories lose power. Its rules stop applying. Because you stop being the one trapped inside the simulation and become the one seeing through it. Now that you understand the origin and structure of the matrix, there is only one step left, understanding the mechanics that hold it together and the mechanics that break it apart. Let's decode the system. If the matrix is not a place but a perception, not a prison but a lens, then the question becomes, what generates the lens? What maintains it? What breaks it? To escape the matrix, you must understand its mechanics, not metaphorically, not philosophically, but energetically, cognitively, and quantumly. Because once you see how it works, you stop being a character in the simulation and become the one directing it. Let's decode the system, piece by piece. 1. The matrix is a perceptual field, not a physical structure. The physical world is real, but your interpretation of it is programmed. The matrix is not the room you're in. It's the meaning you've been taught to assign to the room. It's not the world you see. It's how you've been taught to see it. Two people can live in the same city, the same street, the same environment, and experience two completely different realities. Why? Because the world is filtered through beliefs, emotional patterns, past experiences, internal narratives, attention, unconscious expectations. These filters form a perception field, the personalized matrix around your consciousness. Change the field, and the world you experience changes with it. This is not spirituality. This is neuroscience, psychology, and physics converging. Your perception determines your reality because perception is the interface between consciousness and the quantum field. 2. The quantum field responds to your internal state. In quantum mechanics, particles don't exist in fixed states. They exist in probabilities, potential, superposition. The observer collapses the field, meaning consciousness chooses which version of reality becomes real. This is the observer effect. But here's what they don't tell you. Your emotional state is part of the observation. Your belief system is part of the observation. Your identity is part of the observation. Your sense of self collapses certain timelines and locks others out. The higher self sees infinite possibilities. The programmed self sees only the ones it believes are realistic. The matrix is the narrowing of possibility into the small set of outcomes allowed by your conditioning. But the moment you shift your inner state, your vibration, your self-perception, your beliefs, your access to timelines changes. This is why awakening feels like your life is rearranging itself. It's not chaos, it's recalibration. Your consciousness is choosing a new version of reality. 3. The ego loop, the matrix's operating system. Every simulation needs a program to run it. In humans, that program is the ego loop. The ego loop is made of habitual thoughts, emotional reactions, identity patterns, limiting beliefs, fear-based expectations, inherited narratives. This loop runs automatically, like a script you didn't know you were executing. And here's the mechanism. The ego loop projects the same reality over and over because it cannot imagine anything beyond its programming. It keeps you in same habits, same environments, same emotional cycles, same timeline, same version of yourself. The matrix feels real because the ego loop repeats the same internal reality every day, which stabilizes your external reality. On a quantum level, repetition, itubos, collapse is consistency. Consistency equals what you call the real world. Break the loop, break the matrix. 4. Trauma, the deepest source of programming. Trauma isn't just emotional pain, it's a perceptual imprint, an event that reprograms how you interpret the world. Every trauma installs new rules. I'm not safe. I'm not enough. I'll be rejected. Life is dangerous. Love will hurt me. Trust is risky. These rules become unconscious algorithms that filter reality. This is why two people can go through the same situation and interpret it completely differently. Your trauma is not the event, it's the lens the event carved into your mind. And that lens becomes one of the strongest pillars of your personal matrix. Break the trauma lens, and the world you experience changes. This is why deep healing often feels like waking up in a new dimension, because you literally shifted into a timeline where a different version of you is observing reality. 5. The collective matrix, the shared dream. Beyond personal programming, there's the collective field, the shared reality shaped by society. This includes cultural beliefs, mass fear, social norms, collective trauma, media narratives, groupthink, inherited worldviews. The collective matrix is the default storyline given to every individual. It's the box you're expected to live inside. And here's the secret. The collective matrix is maintained by emotional resonance, not truth. Fear spreads, doubt spreads, conformity spreads, consensus spreads. It's not that the story is true, it's that enough people believe it simultaneously, and their combined perception stabilizes the timeline. When you awaken, you destabilize that agreement. This is why awakened individuals feel out of place in society. Not because they're wrong, but because they're no longer resonating with the collective program. 6. The hidden mechanism. Attention equals energy equals creation. Your attention is the steering wheel of your reality. Whatever you repeatedly focus on becomes more real because attention feeds energy into the quantum field. Fear becomes more real when you feed attention to it. Possibility becomes more real when you feed attention to it. Your identity becomes more stable when you feed attention to it. Your limits become more solid when you feed attention to them. But here's the cosmic's trick. You cannot stop the matrix with force. You stop it by starving it. You withdraw attention from the illusion and you redirect attention to the observer. The moment you shift attention inward, you break the perceptual spell. You disconnect from the loop. You step out of the storyline. Attention is the exit. 7. The higher self, the one outside the loop. Your higher self is not part of the matrix because it doesn't operate through fear, identity, or repetition. It operates through intuition, resonance, clarity, coherence, elevated emotional states, deep presence, quantum knowing. That's why the higher self feels foreign. It doesn't speak the language of the matrix. It doesn't speak in fear. It doesn't speak in urgency. It doesn't speak in limitation. It doesn't speak in programmed rules. It speaks in the language of possibility, in the frequency of remembrance, in the clarity of timeline alignment. The higher self is outside the simulation, observing infinite versions of your life and guiding you toward the one that matches your true frequency. Synchronicities? They are checkpoints, winks from the field, markers that you're moving toward a timeline where your consciousness is more awake. Intuition? That's the non-local aspect of you trying to sneak through the noise of programming. Awakening? That's the moment you start listening. 8. How the matrix breaks, the observer reclaims control. The matrix collapses not when you fight it, not when you reject it, but when you observe the program running instead of being the program. The instant you become aware of a pattern, you disconnect from it. You can't be both the puppet and the puppeteer. Once you see the strings, you stop dancing unconsciously. The moment you notice, this reaction isn't me, it's conditioning, the loop dissolves. The moment you notice, this fear isn't mine, it's inherited, the spell breaks. The moment you notice, this belief isn't truth, it's programming, you step outside the simulation. Awareness is the cheat code, the ultimate override. The matrix survives through unconsciousness. It dies in the light of observation. This is why awakening feels like clarity, like the fog lifting, like the noise quieting, like someone turning on the lights in a room you didn't realize was dark. Because you're not escaping anything, you're remembering. And the moment you remember, you are no longer a character in the simulation. You become the architect, the observer, the consciousness directing timelines. Now that you understand the mechanics, you're ready for what comes next. Breaking the programming for good. You cannot escape a system you're still unconsciously agreeing to. That's the hard truth. That's the unsettling truth. And that's the reason most people never break out of the matrix, not because the system is powerful, but because the identity built inside it is still running the show. This is the moment everything turns. This is where we stop describing the matrix and start dismantling it from the inside. Deprogramming isn't pretty, it isn't gentle, it isn't comfortable. Because you're not just changing beliefs, you're confronting the version of yourself that the matrix trained into existence. Let's break it, layer by layer, lie by lie, program by program. Program number 1, this is just how life is. The matrix's strongest spell is normalcy. If something becomes normal, no one questions it. You were raised in a world that normalized burnout, emotional suppression, debt, mediocrity, self-sacrifice, chronic fear, performative ambition, numbing your intuition, trading your time for survival. You didn't choose these rules. You inherited them. And because everyone around you played the same game, you assumed it was the only game available. But the moment you question it, just once, the spell cracks. What if this isn't how life is? What if this is just how life was taught to me? This is the beginning of escape, not action, not revolution, awareness. Because awareness is the one thing the matrix cannot control. Program number 2, who I am is fixed. You were programmed to believe that identity is permanent. This is just who I am. This is just my personality. This is just how I've always been. But identity is not fixed. Identity is repetition. You become whoever your nervous system felt safest being. You become the version of yourself that received the least resistance, the least rejection, the least danger. That version of you was a survival strategy, not your truth. The matrix doesn't need to control your whole life. It only needs to control the version of you showing up inside it. Because if you believe this is who I am, you won't question the script. You'll defend it. You'll justify it. You'll cling to it, even if it's killing your potential. Deprogramming begins the moment you understand. Identity is adaptable. Identity is fluid. Identity is chosen. You can rewrite the character at any moment once you stop confusing survival patterns with your soul. Program number 3, my fear is protecting me. Fear feels like instinct, like intuition, like caution. But fear is rarely truth. Fear is often memory. Fear is often trauma. Fear is often conditioning. And here's the dark secret. Fear is the matrix's primary fuel. Not because fear is powerful, but because fear shuts down access to higher awareness. When the nervous system is in survival mode, the higher self cannot get through. Your intuition cannot get through. Your clarity cannot get through. The matrix doesn't need to imprison you if it can keep you afraid. Most people mistake fear for safety. They call it logic, responsibility, maturity. But your higher self does not communicate through fear. Never. Not once. If the message is fear, it's the program. If the message is clarity, it's the truth. Learning this difference breaks the spell. Program number 4, the outside world decides my value. This is the deepest illusion of all, the belief that success defines you, approval validates you, failure diminishes you, rejection wounds you, productivity measures your worth, status determines your importance. This belief keeps you obedient, it keeps you running, it keeps you comparing, it keeps you small. Because as long as your value is outside you, you will always be easy to control. But your value isn't external, it's inherent, immutable, unconditional. The moment you stop outsourcing your worth, you unplug from one of the matrix's core power sources. You stop being a pawn, and you start becoming a sovereign consciousness navigating reality instead of obeying it. Program number 5, my thoughts are me. This is the biggest trap of all, the reason the matrix survives. You believe the voice in your head is your voice. You believe the thoughts you think are your own. You believe the fear you feel is natural. You believe the limitations that appear in your mind came from your soul. But thoughts are not you. Thoughts are the residue of your programming. Your mind is a recording device, not an origin point. And most of what you think is simply the matrix echoing through your consciousness long after the original message stopped playing. The moment you realize, I am the observer, not the thought, the simulation collapses. You step out of the character and into the awareness behind the character. The matrix cannot control the observer. It can only control the one who forgets they are observing. Program number 6, my reality is objective. The matrix thrives on the illusion that the world is fixed, solid, neutral, unchangeable. But physics, neuroscience, and Hermetic law all agree reality is not objective. Reality is interpretive. perceptual, quantum. Your internal state determines which version of reality you collapse. If you're afraid, you collapse timelines that match fear. If you're in lack, you collapse timelines that match lack. If you're in expansion, you collapse timelines aligned with expansion. You are not reacting to reality, you are selecting it. Breaking out of the matrix is realizing that you've been generating your reality all along. You just didn't know you had the controller. Program number 7, the matrix is external. This is the final trick, the last illusion, the one that keeps even awakened people trapped. The matrix is not out there. It's not the government. It's not society. It's not the system. It's not the world. The matrix is the version of reality you still unconsciously agree to. You can't escape a world you're still participating in mentally. But the second you stop agreeing, the simulation loses its shape, its gravity, its authority. The matrix dissolves not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it with your attention, your belief, and your fear. The cage disappears when the mind that believed in it wakes up. The turn, from program to sovereignty. This is the moment, the hinge point, the switch. You are not here to become a rebel. You are here to become sovereign. The consciousness that remembers it was never truly inside the simulation. To deprogram yourself is to reclaim your perception, your power, your awareness, your authorship, your identity, your reality. At the deepest level, breaking the matrix is not escape. It is integration. It is remembering the part of you that the matrix could not touch, the observer, the witness, the higher intelligence that has been quietly watching your entire life. Once you step into that awareness, the matrix loses all leverage. You cannot be controlled because there is no story left to control you. You are not the programmed self, you are the presence behind it. Now that the programming has been exposed and its illusions are losing their grip, you are ready for the final step, activation. The moment where you reclaim the truth of who you've always been. Let's step into. Take a breath, slow, deep. Let the air move into you as if you are inhaling a different version of reality, because in a way you are. What you're feeling right now is the final crack in the simulation, the moment where the mind stops repeating and the soul starts remembering. Breaking out of the matrix is not an escape. It is a return to the part of you that the programming could never alter, never reach, never silence. It's time to meet that part of you, to embody it, to let it lead. Close your eyes, or simply soften your gaze. Shift your awareness inward. Listen not to your thoughts, but to the silence beneath them, the presence behind them. That presence, that stillness, is not passive, it is not weak, it is not empty. It is you before the world convinced you to be smaller. It is the consciousness that watched you grow up, watched you struggle, watched you adapt to rules that were never yours. That presence has been waiting for this exact moment, the moment you stop fighting the matrix and start remembering your sovereignty. You are not awakening into a new identity. You are awakening out of one. Let the old version of you fall away now. The version built on fear, on survival, on inherited beliefs, on unquestioned narratives. Let the mask soften. Let the story dissolve. Let the weight you've been carrying drop from your shoulders like dust from an ancient statue finally revealed beneath centuries of illusion. And now breathe again, slow, deliberate, present. Feel the shift. Feel the atmosphere around you change. Feel the internal space inside you growing wider, lighter, deeper. What you are feeling is the observer awakening, the one who sees through programming, the one who stands outside the simulation, the one who has always been free even while you believed you were trapped. You are stepping into the seat of consciousness, the place where the matrix has no control, the place where fear cannot reach, the place where clarity replaces confusion and resonance replaces doubt. This is where truth begins, not in the mind, but in awareness, not in the story, but in the presence behind the story. You are not the program, you are not the fear, you are not the narrative, you are not the character the world forced you to play. You are the one watching the character. You are the one experiencing the mind. You are the one observing the emotions. You are the one collapsing the timeline. You are consciousness remembering itself. Let these words move through you, not as ideas, but as recognition. I'm not inside the matrix is inside me. Say it with your breath. Say it with your awareness. Let it echo through your chest like an ancient truth resurfacing from lifetimes of forgetting. I'm not the programmed self. I am the presence that sees it. I reclaim my perception. I reclaim my sovereignty. Every time you speak these words, every time you return to the observer, you fracture the simulation, you loosen the code, you dissolve the loops, you weaken the fears, you unplug from the collective script that no longer matches your frequency. The matrix cannot hold a mind that refuses to feed it. It cannot sustain a reality that you no longer agree to. It cannot project an identity that you no longer inhabit. The moment you choose awareness, you rewrite the rules. You step into a different field, where synchronicities guide you, where your intuition speaks clearly, where the timelines open, where opportunities align, where your presence shapes reality instead of reacting to it. This is the true meaning of breaking out, not rebellion, not chaos, not running away, but remembering the version of you that cannot be programmed. You are the observer, the witness, the consciousness, the force behind the mind, the original self that came before conditioning and will remain after every illusion dissolves. Feel it now. The clarity returning, the sovereignty rising, the awareness expanding beyond the identity you once mistook for truth. Let this final activation settle into your breath. I choose awareness over programming. I choose presence over fear. I choose reality over illusion. I choose myself. Every time you return to this choice, the matrix loses its shape. The code loses its power. The loops lose their grip. And the world in front of you shifts, softens, opens. You are not breaking out of anything. You are waking up to everything. This is your release, your remembrance, your return to sovereignty. And now your true timeline begins.